So while the major address of Pesach was offered yesterday, and I like that Rabbi Megdal spoke about the Omer, and I'm going to unpack the Omer a little bit more. But first, the frivolity of the holiday. So this was a new T-shirt for me this year. This is what happens when you marry an elementary school teacher, right? So this one. Right? It says bitter herbs. And it's got three guys, all named Herb, I assume, right? Oh, so Herb Rosenthal really appreciated that one. And then, of course, the other one, which will move us into talking about thyme, not the spice, I realize, but right? Right. So this is. Oh, grumpy things. Yeah, right, grumpy things. So how do we count time? Clearly, I knew that it was time that my jokes were getting old, because what do I normally say? I normally talk about the windows. I point out the windows, and so the middle one is Passover, and the bottom one is Shavuot, the Ten Commandments. And I always say we should have some markings in between those two windows so that we can count where we are in between them. And clearly after 20 years or so, Mitchell was tired of me pointing that out, and he actually got us an Omer counter, right, which is amazing, and it's beautiful, and it'll be living in the back. It lives in the back during this time, and it has these, right, that rotate around, so you can see. So now I've set it to 1. There it is. 1. Okay, now it's the first day, the first week. It's no. This is the first. Oh, okay. I moved it to blank. I moved it to a blank. Okay, so almost made a mistake at the very beginning of the Omer. So. Right. So check this out. It's really, really beautiful. And it was a gift from the Solkowitzes. So that's really great. But, when I've been thinking about the Omer on the sense of journey, because I have been feeling like so untethered with the world. Today is 556 of the war. I've been feeling untethered because I think today is like day 83 or something of the new administration. And the world is so difficult in so many ways. And so this idea of grounding ourselves each day at a time is a helpful idea. So much so my mom asked me just the other day, about, why should I count the Omer? Now, of course, she qualified it at the beginning. I don't really observe. I only observe the things I observe. And, so I'm not really, I was like, are you asking the rabbi or are you asking your son? And she's like, I don't know, just tell me about the Omer. I said, well, I'm actually speaking about it the second day. You can see she's not here. So I guess she was asking her son. But this idea of journeying and grounding ourselves, I think is something that's really important. So I wanted to do it. So I brought a poem to start, a little information in the middle, and then a poem to end. And I think thematically, it is this idea of trying to locate ourselves, not just through geography, but locate ourselves, I think, within ourselves, internally. So poetry is a beautiful way to do that. So I think I'll read it just so everyone can hear, but we can follow along. So this is it's called Day 45. From this book, there's 49 poems. Maybe there's 50 poems in the book itself. So this is Day 49, Back to the Summit. The first Seder, he said, is like an airlift to the top of the mountain. The matzah, the singing, the egg dipped in salt water, all mnemonics for the journey you haven't yet taken. When you wake the next morning, you're miles away, cloud-shrouded peak barely visible in the distance. Remember the psalms of praise we sang, like the angelic chorus, right? We did Hallel today. And at each Seder, it's enough, Dayenu, to get you moving. First week's travel is fueled by the hard tack of slavery, which doubles as way bread of freedom. As the feast recedes in memory, was that oasis a mirage? That song that we prayed at the sea spurs you forward. One morning, shards of robin's eggs dot the stone outside your door, and you remember the sign of new life dipped in salt tears. The path grows steeper, but now you're in shape for the discernment work. This is our last night camping beneath the splash of Milky Way. Tomorrow, the summit. You will hear Shema, the fire, the thunder, the still small voice. Will you decode the name emblazoned on every human face? This is the end of the journey. Make every minute count. What do you think? Thoughts? I like this idea of journey. Right? That right now, this sense of freedom is fresh. Right? We're at the beginning of Passover, and yet it's quickly going to recede in our minds. We're going to move back to our regular life, our jobs, our stresses, all of these things. We may, if we haven't already, pick up and see whatever today's news is, and it will disconnect us from this time of Yontif, from this time of telling our story and of reenacting, re-living, re-energizing our story as if we were slaves in Egypt. And then in 49 days, we will get to the next moment as if they are disconnected from each other, as if intellectually we understand the connection between being free people and the need for rules and boundaries that Shavuot gives us. But in between, we will just forget. And the Omer allows us to stay connected. And each day it moves forward. Right? We count in so many ways. Right? I started by saying some of the things that we count on, but we also count on that it's the 2-year yahrzeit of your husband, of your dad. Right? When you told me it's been 2 years, I was like, wow, because I remember so clearly standing out there at the cemetery and being together. Right? And we're still in Shiva for some. Right? We count in so many different ways, and the Omer gives us this intentionality that is so important. So a little information about where the Omer comes from, because this is interesting, at least to me, that it's more than just what we read in the Torah today. Biblically, the link between two festivals, Passover and Shavuot, was agricultural, and the word Omer had another meaning entirely. On the second day of Pesach, today, a sacrifice called the Omer, literally a sheaf or measurement of barley, was offered in the temple, marking the beginning of the harvest season. 50 days later, on Shavuot, a new wheat offering was made, concluding the celebration of the grain offering. As we read in Parshat Omer, as we did today, you shall bring an Omer from your first harvest to the Kohen, and from the day in which you bring the Omer offering, you shall count off 7 weeks. In addition to the command to count the Omer in Parshat Omer, the term appears 2 more times in the Torah. In Shemot, when the Israelites panic about survival in the desert, wondering if God has redeemed them only to let them starve in a foreign wasteland, God rains manna from heaven, and Moshe instructs the people to gather from it for every man according to what he eats, an Omer per person. Rashi teaches that even those who collected too much or too little would find that miraculously, when they returned home, they had exactly 1 Omer per person. In other words, God not only provided sustenance, but ensured that it was distributed equitably. Later, the book of Devarim enumerates civil laws to help the people create a fair and caring society without the need for miracles. Among these is the command that when you reap your harvest in your field, you forget a bundle, an Omer, in the field, that you shall not turn back to take it. It shall be for the stranger, the orphan, and the widow. Just as God allocated an Omer for each person in the desert, so too Jewish farmers are instructed to leave behind any fallen sheaves for the poor. All three biblical mentions of the word Omer, whether an offering in the temple, a gift from God, or an allocation for the needy, are linked by a common theme of gratitude and justice and generosity. The Omer in Parshat Emor is an expression of gratitude for God's role in our ability to provide for ourselves. The Omer in Shemot demonstrates the just way in which God provided for us. And the Omer of Devarim instructs us how to care for one another generously. As God gave us manna in the desert and gives us grain at our harvest, we must provide for each other with a spirit of equality and kindness. This spoke to me because that is exactly what we need more of right now. Right? That each day of counting, we should have the intentionality of generosity, of justice, and of gratitude. These are such simple characteristics and feel like there is not ample amounts right now. And so for 49, 50 days, maybe we'll find something that gives us gratitude. Maybe we will intentionally do an act of justice or an act of generosity during this period, tying Passover to Shavuot. It was interesting to me in that of how the word Omer is used in those different areas of the Torah, not just the offering, but these other instances as well. And so on this journey, this final poem, a poem for counting the Omer. Each spring we recount the Exodus story, leaving slavery, wandering years, slips, and divine encounters. Counting blessings like wheat sheaves, we offer prayers for 7 weeks, carving space at the end of each day. No temple is needed, just breath, holy dwelling. It's my first time to take up the rhythm, keep counting, loosen walls I've built from fear and hurt. What sweetens this? Each time I speak, Shekhinah breathes, sings out through all the spheres, her presence, strength, and expanding heart. So my hope is that each day, even though the poem says we end the day, it is the beginning of the next day. But at that juncture of the end and at the beginning, that we find it within ourselves to give forgiveness to those who need, to give generosity of spirit to those who we have pushed away for whatever reasons, and that we're also able, through this time period of the 7 days, 7 weeks period, that we find it within ourselves to bring in more generosity into the communities that we inhabit. Because, again, it feels like we will be a better community, a better country, if we can offer that to each other and to receive it from each other. Chag Sameach.